So first up this morning, I'm pleased to welcome Charlotte Palmer, who is also a trustee of FWAG, but also part of the West Norfolk Nature Network, and also Max Bodmer from Renew Earth. So over to you guys.
Thank you. Yeah, here we go. Nice pictures of us, lovely. Okay, so we're going to have a bit of a duo. We're going to do this between the two of us. So I'm the project manager for the West Norfolk Nature Network, which is one of the landscape recovery projects in Norfolk. It's a round 2 project. So I'm going to give you a bit of an intro to the project and the kind of challenges we were facing in terms of collecting data. And then we'll go through what the solution is, which Renew has been able to help us with, and kind of how that's worked in the field as well. Okay, so the West Norfolk Nature Network, we are in West Norfolk. So our area covers from kind of Kings Lynn to almost Fakenham, Houghton down to the Nar Valley. We have got some maps later, so you'll be able to see it all a little bit more. We're in round 2, so our project has been going for about 15 months now. So it's completely landowner-led, the West Norfolk Nature Network project. So this was started by someone called David Marsham. He's not in the audience, so he's not going to know that I just got his name wrong. So this was started by David Marsham out of Gayton, and then we've added lots and lots of other farmers. So the initial application went in with 18 landowners. We're now up to 30 across the whole project area. I'm actually just going to remove my headphones because it's a little distracting hearing yourself. So we're now at 30 landowners over 15,000 hectares. So 15,000 hectares is the whole land holding. We are looking at about 5,000 hectares going into full-scale habitat restoration. We have some amazing places across West Norfolk already, and really the aim of our project is to link all of these up so that we can have a really resilient landscape. We're also looking at how the farming systems are going to work across all of those land holdings as well. So we don't want the benefits to nature to stop at the habitat creation that we're making, linking these habitats up. We want to make sure that we have a kind of nature-friendly environment across the whole landscape. So that includes looking at regenerative farming. We do have a couple of farms that are organic already, but we're looking at being able to put in regenerative practices across the whole area. So actually the 15,000 hectares, all of that we can see uplift and connection across the whole landscape. So we're really looking at creation of scrub corridors. We want this kind of scrubby, messy habitat that is actually really good for nature, and being able to link up these different habitats that we already have. So there's 2 very large rewilding projects within the area. So we have Westacre and Little Massingham, and we're looking at creating a big corridor that would actually link both of those areas completely. Maybe at some point in the future we'd be able to have large animals, grazing animals, be able to move across that landscape. That's my kind of dream vision in the future. We're also looking at reinstating a lot of ghost ponds. So we've had the Norfolk Ponds project, have done an assessment of all the ponds in the area, ones that were there or ones that we could reinstate. So again, it's that connectivity, looking at functionally linking those ponds. Can species move between them? How can we restore those? And then lastly, last kind of corridor that we're looking at is river restoration. So we have the Gaywood, the Nar and the Middleton stop drain, so 3 chalk streams, which are of international importance within the area. Again, we've got a history of some really good restoration already, but we want to bring that back. And essentially with that restoration, we want to turn back time. We want to put those rivers back where they should be. We want to, or where they were, we want to reconnect those floodplains, but we also need to think about protecting that farmed area at the same time. So that's a kind of background to our project. The challenge, there's lots of challenges with landscape recovery, I'm not going to lie. We're learning things every day, and it's very, very exciting to be part of these projects. But a big challenge we've had is for such a large area, so 15,000 hectares, we have to baseline what is already there. The big thing is that to be able to get funding for projects like this is that we have to show uplift, we have to show additionality, and by doing that, we have to have a baseline of where we already are, and then we can look at where we get to. How do you do that over 15,000 hectares? I'm the only full-time member of staff on this project, and we had one field season because I started last June and we are handing in February. So how do we do that? How is that possible to be able to really get an assessment of what's there? There's been little bits of data collection in different places, but we also want to look at a strategic baseline. So we need to do the same thing across the whole area. So we're looking at actually being kind of scientifically valid and comparable. So limitations that we've got for this: time, massive limitation; numbers of staff, massive limitation; budget, huge limitation. Ideally, I'd have contracted all of this out and just been able to, get other people to be able to do it and just send me the data. Not possible. That would have taken our whole budget for the whole project to be able to do a baseline in this way. So we're specifically talking about biodiversity baselining. We have done carbon baselining and other things as well, but I'm specifically looking at the biodiversity baseline this time. So what was our solution? We started working with Renew Earth and thought about bringing in technology to make sure that we can get the data that we need.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charlotte. Yes, so we've been working with the West Norfolk Nature Network now for the last 9 months or so to help kind of overcome this challenge associated with getting the biodiversity baseline. At Renew Earth, we are experts in a methodology called the Wallacea Trust methodology, which is a methodology that is gaining a lot of traction in the world of kind of private markets as a means to quantifying biodiversity change over time, so that you can then unitize it and turn it into a credit. So the Wallacea Trust methodology is currently being trialled under several codes that you will have come across. So the Woodland Carbon Code and the Peatland Code are looking at integrating the Wallacea Trust methodology into their existing standards. The Forestry Stewardship Council is integrating it into their ecosystem services procedure, and it's also got a lot of commonality with a lot of the other more global nature standards. So the idea being that projects that are collecting data using this methodology are future-proofing themselves to be able to access the private markets when they become liquid. And that's exactly what the West Norfolk Nature Network needs. It needs to be able to submit the project to DEFRA and showing we've got the baseline that is required for us to then be able to go to the private markets to then actually be able to quantify and monetize the benefits from the project. So a very brief overdown of the Wallacea Trust methodology. It's effectively a basket of metrics approach. So this means that you are identifying at least 5 metrics the wording is that they have to encompass the conservation objectives of your project. The idea behind having to select 5 is that you avoid cherry picking, so that projects have to measure all elements of ecosystem function. And it largely relies on using biotic indicators. So it's using kind of elements of the ecological community as proxies for project success. The Wallacea Trust methodology is specifically rewarding projects for increasing species richness, so the number of individual species that exist within the project, the species abundance, so the number of individuals of each species, and then it preferentially rewards projects for increasing populations of rare and threatened species according to the IUCN Red List. So this is really what we were doing with the West Norfolk Nature Network over the summer. The idea behind the Wallacea Trust methodology is that you will quantify your biodiversity at time 0, so that's now before the project has entered the implementation phase, and then you do exactly the same methodology over time throughout the project period, so 25 to 30 years at regular intervals, so that you can then ultimately see what the percentage change is, so you can directly link that back to your interventions in your project area, and then there are mechanisms for turning those into voluntary biodiversity credits as well. And it's, as I say, it's one of the methodologies that is kind of rising to the top in the world of voluntary biodiversity credits. All of this is underpinned by scientific validation. So the Wallacea Trust methodology is verified by an organisation called the Biodiversity Futures Initiative, who basically looks at the sampling strategies, the sampling methodologies, and makes sure they make sense and that the approach that is being used by the project is actually going to be able to capture the biodiversity benefits that it's hoping to achieve. And then it will also do the analysis of the primary data once it's collected. So it will then validate the size of the claim that the project is making as well. So it's got an entirely kind of third-party independent element to it. And the role of the Biodiversity Futures Initiative is very similar to the Soil Association's role within the Woodland Carbon Code or the Peatland Code. And I'll hold back to Charlotte.
Thank you. So what did we actually do in the field? And one of the things I wanted to mention was that essentially at the end of landscape recovery projects, we have two different groups of people that we're trying to satisfy. One is DEFRA, and I have 6 large reports that have to go into DEFRA. And then we also have the private markets, because landscape recovery projects, we're supposed to come up with blended finance. So some public finance, but also private finance. And these two things, what those two kind of customers, I guess, at the end want are not the same. It'd be easier if they were. So the thing that made me want to go towards this approach is that we could satisfy both. So we can do the biodiversity baseline that DEFRA requires, but we're doing it in a measurable way that means we can also market it as well. And then to add to that, we can actually get some of this done during with technology. We can harness that to be able to collect huge amounts of data. So when it comes to what data you need to collect for landscape recovery, it's a little bit of an open book, and it probably won't be in the future, but we're still in the pilot stage. The only thing that we absolutely have to do is that we have to define all of the habitats in our project area, and we have to give a condition assessment. So we have to go through the DEFRA metric, which is essentially what people do when it comes to BNG, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to define what the habitat is and what condition it is, so we can say how much uplift we have. So as part of the Wallacea method, you always have a structural metric. So this is our structural metric. So we did this by taking photos, essentially. And I did a lot of it. Max did some of it. We also have another volunteer in the office that did audience that did some today as well. But essentially, what we were able to do is take out a lot of the expertise by taking photographs that are then assessed by a panel of ecologists. Okay, so that expertise is there, but it's not somebody wandering around a field. So we can do the legwork. You don't have to have huge amounts of expertise. And then the expertise comes from the kind of the back end. So when I say we took some photos, I think it was about 60,000 over the whole area. This did take time. I would say that if I'd have just done this full time, this would have been 2 months worth of work of me full time. It took longer than that because there were other things to do in the office, and I did have people come and help as well. DEFRA essentially wanted me to do most of it because I have a biological background, but we're hoping once we go through this process, we can prove that actually you don't need to have those kind of skills to wander around and take photos. So you have an app. It's the Mosaic Earth app that we used. It directs you to the point of where you need to take the photos, and then it directs you to what sort of photos you need to take. So in the woodland, for instance, we'd be taking canopy cover, we'd be taking horizontal photos, and we'd be taking photos on the ground. If you were doing a grassland, it would be more aimed towards the ground because there isn't any canopy cover, etc., etc. And then those photos will be assessed alongside the condition assessments. So for woodland, for instance, yes, you'll be looking at canopy cover, you'd be looking at how many numbers of native trees you have in the area, you'd be looking at the ground flora to be able to assess the condition. But that meant we were able to cover that large area. Ooh. Both of us talk too much, so. Okay, with birds, we had acoustic monitors. So we had 40 acoustic monitors out over the project area. They were recording 24 hours a day for a month. Imagine how long that would take if we were doing that in person. The other thing about using this technology is that it is repeatable by multiple people, and you can take out that kind of human interference or that human error, basically. It's also auditable. So we can look back at those photos in 20 years' time and be able to track how much things have changed. So that was first 2 metrics. Then we had the invertebrates. So we did a pan trap for pollinators, and we did pitfall traps for ground-dwelling arthropods, so 2 different types of invertebrates. These are then being sent off for metabarcoding. So it's quite important that we collected those samples, which takes out a lot of the error which DNA sampling can have sometimes if we're looking at kind of environmental DNA. But we collected those samples so we know that those species were there at that time. So that they're currently being assessed at the moment. And then I'm going to go back to Max for what our sampling strategy was. And you can see a little bit more of where our kind of project area is. So we did concentrate the data collection in the area that is going to become semi-natural habitat, but we also did some plots out in the farmland as well.
Brilliant, fantastic. Yeah, so basically all of those metrics that Charlotte was kind of mentioning just then, they were designed to really encompass the conservation objectives of the project. So you've got pollinators, because we want to see kind of increases in pollinator diversity, ground-dwelling invertebrates, really important for turnover and regeneration as well. And so essentially, I think the more impressive map is probably this one. So here you can see just how many points we were able to get to across the summer. And this was through a combination of very hard work from Charlotte, kind of enabling all of the technology, and then also kind of getting volunteers involved in this process as well. I think a really, really key thing to highlight here is the cost saving that is associated with this approach. Basically, we have found that we were able to do this very comprehensive baseline. You can see across the entire area. This has a total cost. It was £77,000 across the entire project area to get this volume of data. If you were to do this approach using kind of contracted ecologists with kind of normal day rates and those kind of approaches, you'd be looking in the hundreds of thousands of pounds in order to collect an assessment like this. So when we're talking about this approach, I'm always hesitant to call it low cost, but I would always refer to it as lower cost. And it is certainly more cost efficient, and the extent of the data that is able to be collected is really significant. And as Charlotte mentioned, really the key thing here is that this is a data set that will satisfy DEFRA's requirements as part of the landscape recovery submission process, but it will also satisfy the needs of the private markets. So it's got that dual purpose that will hopefully mean that the West Norfolk Nature Network is able to secure the funding that it needs in order to maximise the benefits in this area. And I reckon that's probably us for time.
Click onto the results.
Oh, click onto the results. Okay, perfect. So we've
only got the bird results back at the moment. Everything else is in the process, but it just starts to give you an idea. I found this really, really exciting. Like if you look at the circles there, each of our survey points for those acoustic monitors. And it just highlights the number of species. But if you've got any questions about this, Max and I will be around all day. Just give us a shout anytime.
Fantastic.
Bye.